Hi, I'm Tom Scioli, author of I Am Stan, a graphic biography of the legendary Stan Lee. And in the show notes below, you can pre-order the full version of the book by following the pre-order link in the show notes below. The full book will be available in August in comic book stores and in September for bookstores. So this Masterverse He-Man, I saw this at Target, and I haven't bought a He-Man toy in a while, but this one kind of jumped out at me. It's the New Adventures of He-Man, which I don't have any of the New Adventures of He-Man toys, and this is a pretty nice, like, deluxe reissue. That New Adventures of He-Man, I remember the first time I learned about its existence, and I got up real early for some reason and turned on the TV, and there was some kind of like CGI He-Man animation showing this kind of like new sort of sci-fi, like Flash Gordon, like space opera version of He-Man, and it was really compelling. It was really interesting. There wasn't any, like, there was no dialogue or anything with it. It was just sort of, it looked like early CGI demonstration. Later on, I kind of wondered, like, hey, did I dream that? Was that real? And then not too long after that, the toys came out, the cartoon came out, and it was sort of like a reinvention of He-Man. And I guess at a certain point, Mattel kind of, after the initial popularity of the toy, it had like really like died down a lot. And all of those toy companies, they always seemed, like in the early 80s, they all seemed like they wanted their own Star Wars, and they wanted to make their thing more like Star Wars. And G.I. Joe seemed like it was trying to, as it went on, become more like Star Wars. And He-Man also, it was, I guess, trying to be a little more like sci-fi space opera and less Dungeons and Dragons, Tolkien-esque, Frank Frazetta fantasy, Robert E. Howard or whatever. It was going for more of like, John Carter, Warlord of Mars, Flash Gordon, Luke Skywalker. I think, that new aesthetic did appeal to me. I was interested, but like as a kid, I could see why they maybe felt the necessity to do that. When I was a kid, it seemed like everybody sort of grew out of He-Man faster than they grew out of, G.I. Joe, for example. Like the kids I knew, they kind of like stuck with G.I. Joe a little bit longer than they did with He-Man. I think that, in the early 80s, He-Man was growing out of sort of like a 70s aesthetic, this sort of 70s barbarian aesthetic. But like the further you got from the 70s, the more it was sort of at odds with, just sort of like the world of like, Arnold Schwarzenegger wasn't doing Conan movies anymore. He was doing Commando and sort of more militarized movies. And so since then, I've seen like artwork of when they were doing sort of like a more like military update of He-Man, where they were going to put him on Earth in a G.I. Joe setting. And that didn't end up coming to pass. But this New Adventures of He-Man is what it ended up being. And when the show finally came on, I loved the intro, like the sort of credits sequence. The animation was just exquisite, just like really amazing, really fun. It felt very contemporary, had like an anime influence to it, and then the show itself was fine. It was all right. It was a little more run of the mill, but I enjoyed that well enough. But I never got into the toys. The toys, it just they looked really cool in that CGI preview, but I just didn't want to make that commitment to a new line, and there was nothing in it that was that compelling. But this sort of souped up version is pretty nice, and I'm always a fan of sort of translucent green stuff, that sort of kryptonite aesthetic. So again, it was an impulse buy, but I thought, why not? So let's open this up and look at that artwork on the back. This aesthetic is just something I'm really fond of. It kind of is reminiscent of those great like Micronauts paintings. See if there's any surprises in here. When you have that window, it's kind of what you see is what you get. I like this sort of Castle Grayskull background here. And the comics that came with, I was hoping there'd be a comic included. I guess not. But like the comics they included with the New Adventures of He-Man were not great quality, except for the last couple issues were done by Bruce Timm, and they're actually pretty neat. They have sort of like a Wally Wood influence that sort of fits this, space opera aesthetic really nicely. And this figure seems like kind of a compromise between, like a best of both worlds between the animated version of the character and the toy version, where the toy version was, had sort of the helmet and stuff. It looks like a nice compromise between the two. Oh yeah, it looks like he has the ponytail. I don't think the toy had the ponytail. The animated version had the ponytail. The toy didn't. That sure looks like Flash Gordon. Like if you just showed this to somebody and said, this is Flash Gordon, he definitely reads as Flash Gordon. It's funny because when you're a kid, you don't understand the turmoil that's kind of going on within these companies as they're sort of panicking, as their cash cows are running out of steam. And so it's just kind of like, oh, I wonder why they changed up He-Man. Again, not that I was against it. I mean, I definitely was ready for the change, definitely welcomed it, He-Man was feeling a little stale by that point. Although I did like the direction it was going with the Canon Films Dolph Lundgren He-Man movie. All the restraints off of this guy. Looks like, okay, there's still something on the legs. Here we go. Yeah, I liked the redesign of the power sword, making it into more of like a lightsaber, this kind of crystal thing, and the translucent plastic here is pretty nice. Sometimes these accessories don't quite fit into the hands of the characters. There we go. Okay, and then the shield fits into this wrist. It's like a little hole there on the wrist. And yeah, there he is, fairly posable. Got the, not too bad. And then it's got like an extra set of hands for punching. And then the helmet goes on. Looks like a American Gladiators, or like it's that game Smash TV. Casper Van Diem in Starship Troopers when they're playing that sport, that futuristic sport, or Pyramid, the Pyramid Ball, I think it is the sport they play on the old Battlestar Galactica. Oh, cool. Okay, so yeah, there's a little back thing to hold the sword. I like that. That's cool. There he is in full armor mode, ready to do battle with the armies of Space Skeletor. That's like closer to what the toy looked like, and the armor also has a little place for the power sword. So yeah, pretty cool. Like I said, kind of like a nice little, like even if he's not, if you don't, it's just kind of like a nice all-purpose space warrior, space gladiator. I don't know that I'll go out and if they come out with any more, of this New Adventures of He-Man, I don't know that I'll get any of those. I was never too fond of the look that Skeletor got there. Just such a fan of the old school Skeletor. I wish they would have, maybe pushed that aesthetic a little more. You could still fit that into space opera. The New Adventures of He-Man. I haven't seen all the episodes. I don't know if they ever did an episode where they show, how they get from, Eternia to, Planet Grayskull, or whatever, wherever they end up in this, where it's more of like a planet hopping kind of thing. They're not just confined to one planet. They're like, getting in spaceships and going from planet to planet. I know, I've also seen some art of like a proposed storyline where, Castle Grayskull gets demolished, and then inside is, I think it's Spaceship Eternia. Inside of Castle Grayskull is Spaceship Eternia, and like as Eternia is being taken over by Skeletor or whatever, He-Man, takes off in a spaceship, to fly to some other planet. Maybe even Eternia gets destroyed, and like Krypton, and he has to start a new life off in space. Who knows? The box is pretty nice. Nice painting of the new version of He-Man. It's He-Man Galactic Protector. And then I guess this gives you the scoop on what happened. He-Man Galactic Protector. By the power of Eternia, the endangered planet of Primus is under attack by the evil mutants, leaving the Galactic Guardians but one choice. They travel back through time to summon the one hero who could save them. He-Man, the most powerful man in the universe. Okay, I guess that's a way of doing it. I like the idea of Eternia blowing up and He-Man having to flee into the depths of space and discovering a new territory to explore. Just because He-Man doesn't necessarily have to take place in the distant past. It could be the future, it could be the past, could be another dimension, another planet. But you do what you got to do. As a kid, these like developments of the stories did. They did like really capture my imagination, and because they usually didn't give you any kind of like explanation of what happened, you kind of had to fill in the blanks yourself. So and pretty shortly after this show came out, I moved on to like real anime and real space opera instead of this sort of approximation of it. I'm Tom Scioli, author of Jack Kirby, The Epic Life of the King of Comics, and I Am Stan. And in the show notes below, you can follow the pre-order link to pre-order the full version of the I Am Stan book.